Recorded on May the 11th, 2012, you're listening to the Wild Paw Dog Podcast with John Buskell and Karen Wild. About buying a dog. There's something we can all do to make the life we share with our dogs better.
In this week's show, we're talking about dogs out and about. That's our general theme. And we also get to talk to Rosemary Conley, the well-known fitness guru and Dancing on Ice star, about her dogs and how she attributes much of her fitness to being out and about with her dogs too.
Oh, and to start off, Karen, we've got a message from Joe Pay.
Oh, Joe's one of my friends from Facebook. Oh, that's nice. Let's hear.
Hi Karen and John, it's Jo here up at Standish Dog Trainer near Manchester. I just wanted to drop you a quick message to let you know that I really enjoy listening to your podcasts. I like that you aren't afraid to discuss the more nitty-gritty topics and that you get a little bit geeky. And Karen, I do love your soapbox moments, so keep those up. Thanks very much, guys.
Thank you very much, Joe. That was a nice comment.
My soapbox moments.
Yes, Karen, what are you and your soapbox? I've never heard of that.
No, I don't do that.
Yes, that was in response to an episode 2 episodes back where we were talking things rather heatedly, but as ever,
we did. But I think in defence of that, not that it needs defending, but if you're working in the industry that we're working in and welfare is at the forefront, and that's not just the animals' welfare, that's the people, then I think, that's something that we all do. And I know Joe's the same. When I've seen comments on Facebook, we all believe really passionately in what we do. We really do.
Yeah. So thanks again, Joe, for coming along and leaving a comment there. We love that kind of thing. And if anyone else wants to leave a comment, just go along to the Wild Paw website. And what's that web address, Karen?
It's intellidogs.com, and then you go to the blog. So there's a slash and then blog, or there's a link on the top right-hand corner of the homepage, and you can go straight through to my blog. And there's a lovely orange button that you can click on, and then that will record your message. But also on the blog, there's lots and lots and lots of information about training your dog. It's all free, and there's also links to the other podcasts as well if you want a specific subject. So you can go in and say, you've got a problem with toilet training your dog or something like that, then you can just search for that term. So it comes out quite nicely now.
Yep. And if you want to ask a question on Twitter, just ask away at Wildpaw, and we'll definitely pick that up and maybe say hello to you on the show. Karen, let's get into the main segment today.
Right. Well, this is something that we've touched on before, and I keep getting asked it, and I keep more and more behaviour cases that I'm seeing are to do with problems when people's dogs are out and about. So I thought it would be important, because the weather is better now and we seem to be venturing further afield, to just bed down some ideas on what to do if you're out and about with your dog. And the big one, which is, what if your dog gets picked on by another dog? Now, I don't think it happens. It's not an unusual thing, is it, where you have another dog charging up to yours? And sometimes it can cause problems later on, particularly if you have quite a vulnerable puppy or an adolescent dog that's very sensitive at that time, and an unknown dog comes charging over. So I don't know. I mean, with your hounds, when you're out, does it happen to you guys?
Yes, it does. In fact, when Bernard was alive, Bernard got attacked by a lab. I think it was either a golden or a lab, and we were out, and all 4 of the dogs at the time, Winnie, Tia, Aggie, and Bernard. And after that, whenever the dogs saw a similar breed, they would go completely ballistic. Not in the sense that they would get angry or anything, but they would, Bassets have got this really deep "oh," and it really left a mark on them. And, Bernard passed away, and there are lots of Goldens and Labs around here. And now that I have his grandson, Digby, the infamous "I'll eat a hole in your wall if you're not watching," Digby. Actually, he's grown out of that. Even he has sort of picked up this behaviour from the girls. They're still scared after being picked on by this dog. So yeah.
So they've made a kind of very specific connection with that particular breed then.
Yep, absolutely.
It's a really difficult one, isn't it? And I've just written an article for our local council website, in fact, saying, that, because they said, apart from dog mess being a problem, one of the other big complaints about dogs in general is just this complaint. And it's ironic that it's other dog owners that complain. It's not just members of the public. It's people are worried for their own dog. And I think that's quite normal. We certainly wouldn't allow our children to kind of race up to other people's kids and start pushing them around. So it always amazes me why that would be allowed. I can only think that if it's your own dog and perhaps you haven't got control over them, that you get caught out and that's what happens. But I don't know. I don't know if there are people that do it deliberately and they're very, very sort of relaxed and casual about the behaviour of their own dog and just, call at you and say they're friendly. That's certainly something that's happened to me a lot when I've been working with dogs. And, I had one client a few years ago who had a very, very nervous dog. And I used to exercise it for her from time to time when she was away because there was no one else that would take this dog out. And the dog was muzzled. It's a very fearful dog. And we were in a very quiet place. But this dog appeared towards her from out of a hedge. And, the dog that I was looking after went berserk. I was doing everything I could to get her out of the way, to calm her down. And it was just one of those situations where you just think, right, I just need to get out of this situation. I saw the owner and shouted to him, call your dog.
Yeah.
And he went, no, she's fine. And I said, no, she's fine, but mine isn't.
Yeah, exactly. No, the reason I interrupted there, I was just thinking it might be good if we actually defined being picked on. I mean, my immediate response was to talk about the time that Bernard was attacked. But also one of the things that I come up quite regularly, I come across a lady who has 3 Shelties, and they bark absolutely bonkers at my lot. They really do.
I think that's really interesting that you've said that, because I think in our eyes, we might think that it's not being picked on. We might think that they're just being friendly, or we might think they're just being a bit boisterous, or the dog might just be being very sort of mildly friendly, but the other dog is very sensitive to it and doesn't like it. So it's very hard to assess what's actually picking on and what's being picked on. And funnily enough, this is kind of relevant. I wrote an article for Dogs Today for the next issue on, being bullied or being a bully. Which one is it? If you're the dog owner, which is which? And actually, when I was writing the article, the one conclusion I came down to was, it's really hard to tell, because if you have a dog that's very manners sensitive and another dog that isn't, they might just have like coarse play skills. They might just come charging along going, play with me. This is how I learned to play in puppy playgroup. And your dog might be a very refined character who actually knows all the nuances and probably was a bit more carefully socialized, doesn't like that sort of behavior. And it can cause all sorts of problems. The other warning is if you are a bit more relaxed dog owner and you are the one that lets your dog go running over, be careful, because if your dog gets told off, and they will at some point if they're a little bit boisterous, that might set them back as well. So, but it's easy to say that. What I normally do is end up advising somebody whose dog has been either jumped all over, set about, or landed on by someone else's dog that's out of control.
So what do you do in that kind of situation?
I think the first thing to make sure of is that you have an absolutely rock solid recall for your own dog or dogs, that they come back, on a sixpence. They will turn around, they will come straight back to you. And that's something that you can do that will really, really help you in these sorts of situations. Now, there are different situations, and I'm sure everyone listening is thinking, well, what if the dog's here, But the first thing I would say is make sure that you have enough control over your own dog that they will turn away from any distraction, no matter what it is, and come heeling it back to you and land at your feet saying, yes, what would you like me to do? Now, that's easy to say, Karen, and someone might be listening going, yeah, Karen, she's a trainer, she can get this. And also you're talking about dogs that were off lead. And also, this does happen when dogs are on lead as well, because, they pull. Well, so what do we do with this? Well, the important criteria with that recall is there's several important things that we need to teach. And we will, once you get them, life becomes a lot easier. So the first thing is, if a dog is right next to you or 20 feet away or 100 feet away, calling them means that if they do it correctly and if you've taught them correctly, they will turn away from any distraction that's in front of them, and therefore break eye contact. So if there's a dog that's ahead that's barking or staring or lunging or doing any of those things, then that will actually give your dog a break point where it can just disengage from that and come back. back. So once they've turned away, that's the important part. That will help. The next thing is, unless there are situations where it might not, but on the whole, that will help. The dog will then start to become under your control. So you might want the dog to stay there. If you judge that that's not a safe thing to do to come back to you, you can tell them to wait, or most of the time you want them back to you. So even if they are at your feet, looking ahead, if you back away, even just take a pace backwards and call them, then that eye contact will be broken, and that will help anything stop escalating. So it just calms things down a little bit. Unless you have a really, like I said, there are situations where it may not, where you may have a dog that's particularly guardy and will more likely to pick on your dog if its backside is showing. But on the whole, staring leads to barking, leads to lunging, leads to problems. So turn your dog away, call your dog back to you. Once your dog's at your feet, then you can make another judgment. Do I actually trust this dog ahead? Are they being playful? What does the owner look like? Is the owner looking like they're half crazed and worried? Or do they look really relaxed? Or do they look like they haven't even noticed? So that buys you some time as well.
How do you train to get the dog to look at you and come back? I mean, you haven't answered that really.
No, I know. Well, no, there's lots of different ways of doing this. I mean, if you want the full-on complete training thing, then there is, this sounds like a plug now, but there is a download on my site that you can buy. It's something like $2.99, and that's called Rock Solid Recall, and it will get your dog to come back to you no matter what. But the main things are not allowing your dog to get to a distance where you don't have control, keeping them on a lead or a long line if you know that their recall is a bit iffy under certain circumstances, and repeating this turning away behavior. And you can train it with toys and other things that your dog wants to go to. You can train it with friendly dogs that you can train it with people, so that your dog learns that coming back to you is the best thing possible. And there's lots and lots of different ways of motivating a dog to do this. It's not just waving food around. That's something that is quite often people say, yeah, but even for chicken my dog won't come back. No, that's because it's not been trained thoroughly enough, and you haven't trained with distractions yet. And you can achieve it. So just because they want the chicken one day and they don't want it another doesn't mean to say you don't offer it, but you actually need to back yourself up with something like a long line or something like that and practice. And you can make it fun. I mean, it can be a really good game. I love playing those sorts of games. And I like I've said before, I always like my dogs to be just a little bit worried where I might be. So I dash off and hide, and I play hide and seek with them, and I do things like that around the house. I never chase them myself. I get them to chase me and play. So, I build up a rock solid recall from all of my dogs.
That's fabulous.
And the reason it's a multifold thing. So when I say it's easy, I do think training is straightforward, but what takes the time and effort is building it into distractions and trying to be a bit more creative if your dog isn't easily motivated by certain things. But you can always ask an expert to help you if you're really struggling. The most important thing, though, is that you gain some kind of control out of the situation, because you cannot possibly hope to control someone else's dog. I mean, you might get there, but usually what ends up happening is everyone sort of has a bit of a shout at each other, and that doesn't make it nicer for the dogs either. So controlling your dog is a lot easier than controlling someone else's. I know that sounds like a very easy thing to say, and yes, I'm a trainer, but I'm also a human being, and I have a family life as well. So I don't have hours and hours and hours to spend on training my dog. Time saving is very important for me, not cutting corners. So if you've got an effort where you've made a very centered effort on turning your dog away back to you, do it in the house, do it in the garden, do it on the lead, do it on a long line, build it up like that. So your dog knows this is the pattern. So when you call them, they never make a mistake. They always know exactly what to do. Now, that's not to say that they'll never get it wrong. Of course they will. But the most important thing is to sort of ensure yourself and build these foundations so that if this other dog appears on the horizon, you can do something about it. So that's the first thing. If you can do that, you'll probably find that that's 85% of the problem solved. Awareness, making sure that you're ahead of the game is a brilliant skill. And after a lot of experience, you find that just comes naturally. But sometimes you have to have this kind of switched on awareness all the time when you're out with your dogs. And
what I do is if anyone sees a tall man with 3 basset hounds skipping down the road, you know that he's training recall. No, because what I do is that my lot, because basset hounds can be very, nose down to the ground. They don't really want to do anything. And and it can take a lot to excite a rather lazy basset hound. But if another dog comes, and like when we run into labs, and when they will go on the alert, and what I've trained them is, okay, if I start skipping in a different direction, they all go, oh, it's party time, and that's the thing that gets them.
Yeah, and that takes the tension out of a situation as well. If you're very light, because what we habitually do is warn the dog, or we might shout to the other owner, or we might say something. I said to you, the first thing I do is I'll call the other owner. If I think there's a problem, I'll sort of say, can you call your dog? And I try and keep my voice really high and light, because I don't want my dogs to think, oh, something's wrong.
But talking about other owners and sort of calling out to them, I have to tell this story. I'm out walking Digby. I live right by a forest, 10 kilometres. We're out for a nice long walk. And, we're enjoying ourselves. He's on a flexi koppel, one of these flexi long lead things, so he can run along. And we meet two ladies coming up the hill through the forest. And they have got, they must have been Australian, the herding Australian, whatever it's called, Australian sheepdogs. And these two Australian sheepdogs go absolutely ballistic. I mean, Digby looks at them and was like, huh? And he looks at them and goes, huh? And looks at me. And these two Australian dogs go absolutely ballistic. And I said to them, oh, it's okay. He's used to other dogs. We've got 4 at home. It's not a problem. He's always happy. Don't worry about it. It's no problem. And also I sort of implied that I don't have a problem with other dogs getting. And they blanked me completely. They totally blanked me completely. And I was just being friendly. And I wondered, and I thought afterwards, these were obviously experienced dog people. You could tell because they had all the kit. They were kit types with all the right clothes. And there I am in my stuff falling to pieces. But they looked the absolute dog part, And I wondered afterwards, and I've been meaning to ask you, Karen, and I'm glad this came up. Were they doing the right thing by just blanking me? Had they watched one of these dog trainers who've been like, if your dog's going crazy, don't acknowledge the other dog or don't acknowledge the other owner at all? They blank me. Is that just being darn rude, or is there some approach there?
It's not a formal approach that I've advised people to do, because I find that, we are humans as well. So sometimes it's quite nice to acknowledge people in a polite way. If you're very silent all of the time, and then the only time you ever speak is when your dog goes crazy at other dogs, then I could see that would be like a very noticeable difference. Or if you only ever shout when your dog is going crazy at other dogs, or if you warn your dog or say sort of a grumbly, aggressive sounding things, then I could see that would probably make things worse. I tend to chat to my dogs, and I chat anyway. So if I suddenly went quiet, I think my dogs might wonder what the hell was going on. So I think a lot of that depends. Yes, it could be what they call extinction, which is where if you don't acknowledge anything, you just ignore it, then the idea is that eventually it stops being rewarding and it just sort of goes away. I think it wouldn't necessarily be something I would advise, because I would rather, I suppose, just acknowledge to the person, but I wouldn't be aggressive or scary, or I would just say, and quite often I've said this with the dog I was talking about earlier. I might say, no, it's not time to say hello today. Thank you. And I'm just like my normal voice, and hi, how are you? And they call it jollying. If you've got a dog that is nervous, and say, for example, that the dog that is creating a fuss is actually slightly uncertain, which quite often they're uncertain or frustrated or a bit of both. If they're uncertain and you sound uncertain yourself, they're going to worry what's going on. If you give them something predictably happy or predictably rewarding to respond to, then that can actually help them quite a lot. But you don't wait until you're far too close to try and deal with it. You give them plenty of advanced training further away, so you can gradually build up. So yeah, I guess it could be. It's not something I've come across a great deal, and I'm very much a fan of speeding things up by saying, okay, well, I've got a feeling my dog is going to do this, so I'm going to give my dog something better to do.
Yeah,
so that they're so busy thinking about me that they're not thinking about them. And I think just ignoring them might be criticised if you're just letting the dog cope on its own with something that it actually can't cope with. So I think, I certainly wouldn't shout at my dog or try and sort of overdo things when they're close by. I might give them regular, predictable instruction that they can do elsewhere and gradually build up to a bigger distraction, such as a dog at close range, and then work on asking the dog to walk to heel, and then praising the dog for doing exactly what I want it to do. So I'd probably approach it slightly differently. So I'm not saying it has no value, because extinction of that sort, if that's what they were trying to achieve. Yeah, it does. It's quite slow, and it's quite can suddenly fail, and sometimes it's better to bed down.
But there are these trainers who always insist on ignoring everything.
Ignoring everything that they don't want to encourage, as in
pure extinction.
Yeah. I think, I mean, it's a very clinical approach. I think that there are trainers. I mean, Ian Dunbar, I'm not saying about this specific example because I can't put words into his mouth, but he has sort of said he's not a fan of a sort of binary all or nothing approach.
Yeah.
It's not sort of this or nothing. And it tends to be, it's nice to modulate and to fit, because dogs tend to do that as well. They have ranges of emotion and ranges of reaction. So it's quite nice to modulate towards that. And I think that's quite an interesting thought, that you could be a very sort of severely strict trainer that only doesn't shape, just waits for all or nothing, or only shapes behavior and never never sort of partly rewards with the voice, or partly it's all like, for example, if you're using a click is that's it, you either get the click or you don't get the click. There's a big debate about that, and and I can understand why somebody would do it, and it's solid learning theory. I don't think it necessarily, it's a shame, because I think it's like saying an instrument can only play notes for silence. But I don't think it's quite like that. I think there's volume, I think there's tone, there's melody, there's putting it together, there's so, and every audience is different, more varied.
Every audience is different.
And if I'm talking to a client and I'm saying, okay, this is what I'd like to do, they've probably taken their dog down the road of a lot of error chains, things that I don't really want their dog to learn, or their dog's learned in the wrong way or at the wrong time or inappropriately. So I kind of can't just ignore all of that. And I think if you've got a set pattern, it's important to stop doing that. Yes, but I think you've got to provide something else, because the dog is used to some kind of feedback. So I don't know. I think it's like they say, there's no easy answer to that. I'm sort of sitting on the fence really, because there are situations where I might say don't react.
Okay. Am I going down because something goes through my head when we're talking about this, Karen, and that is, if your dog gets, if your dog is the aggressor, don't lay into them. Don't follow the Caesar, I'm going to put your bottom on the floor or roll you over. Don't physically jump into your dog, because if the dog is all up and ready and if you go in too, the dog could turn on you too. Is that?
Oh, yeah, quite easily. I mean, and this is something that's happened and made it to court, where a dog has run over and they've tried to separate the dogs and move them apart and got bitten in the process. Now, the issue is, if that's your dog, are you going to protect it or not? And I think most people would. I think most people, even though they know that there's a risk they're going to get bitten, they'd still put their hand down and try and get their dog out of the situation.
Yeah.
Now that's something that, heaven forbid you get into that situation, because like I say, if it's like being attacked, you don't wander around with your hands over your ears and your eyes shut. You try and be aware of things and you try and deal with things before they happen. But if that happens, yes, there is a chance that you might have to get a dog out of trouble. What I wouldn't do, though, which I think you've sort of touched on, is try and punish it out of the dog. And I think that's where, these sort of stupid idea about rolling the dog over and things like that. Well, if the dog is absolutely trying to bite everything in sight and you have no other choice, and you haven't deliberately put the dog in that situation, which I think is done in the name of training sometimes, which I'm very against, you are going to have to get the dog out of the situation. You're going to have to stop the dog biting somebody. If it was your responsibility to protect that dog and stop that dog getting in that situation in the first place, and you deliberately created that situation, then to me that's completely out of order. And that's certainly what I've seen on television. I just think that's ridiculous and pretty unfair and horrible. But if you're in a situation where a dog is absolutely roaring at somebody or something and you've got to try and get it out of the way, I think most of us would probably try and get it out of the way, don't you?
Oh, yeah. ASAP, you're not going to hang around.
And even if you knew that there was a risk you might get bitten, you would probably try and get the dog off. Now, there's ways to do that. And I've done a talk for the APBC on self-protection for the behaviourist. And that's more to do with making sure you don't put yourself in a situation of of danger with a client possibly. But there was a section on that about defending yourself against the dog that's attacking you, and it's not pretty reading. Let's hope that no one ever has to do that. But yes, the risk of getting bitten is quite high. So again, if you aren't sure what to do, try and get your dog out of the situation. If you're kind of in a situation you can't get out of easily, one of the easiest things to do, in fact, is to suddenly say sit, because it might be that their dog is trained partly. Most dogs can sit. So if you give a big hand signal, as long as they're not trying to grab you and grab your hand, and tell them to sit in a very positive kind of dog trainery way, then you may well get enough time to control that dog. The other thing you can do is grab your handful of treats that you keep in your pocket and chuck them on the floor, away from your dog, obviously, because we don't want a big scrap arising around your feet, but throw them towards the other dog, because quite often a nice smelly treat flying towards them, or a big handful, almost like a depth charge, boom, will suddenly distract them enough for you to, again, to give the owner a chance to get their dog back or to get your dog out.
That's a great idea. That's a great idea.
It's a really nice way of dealing with a situation that could turn horrible. There are, some trainers will advise carrying a sound spray with you, like an compressed air spray. And they say, you could use that, because then what that would do is it's an aversive, and it will make the other dog back off and run off, and it will frighten them enough. And I would be very cautious about advising that, because don't forget your dog's right there as well.
Yeah.
So it might make a bad situation a hell of a lot worse. It might get you out of trouble, but it might make it a lot worse as well. So you've got to be aware of, and it also might wind the dog up even further. So these are decisions we have to make in the heat of the moment, really. I think I'd go for the very clear sit and a load of food chucked all over the place.
Definitely.
And quickly get my dog out of the way.
Definitely. It sounds like a war zone, to be honest. But let's...
How my clients, when they come to me, they're really upset because their dog has been, landed on, aggressively or not, by a dog that's had, just very coarse play skills, and it's been beaten up, basically, even in fun. So, if you don't want your own dog to develop like that, they need to play from puppyhood with not just other puppies, but with dogs of all ages, and that are bigger than them and smaller than them. So they learn these nuances that I mentioned right at the start. Let's not have your dog being the bonkers out of control one. If it is bonkers and out of control, and maybe you've taken on a rescue dog, then, like I say, I've got clients that I'm helping at the moment with their dogs that are like that, and they're doing really well just getting the dog to be under control. And the dog's got a lot more freedom as a result of it, because they can control the dog, so they can call it away when things get a bit much.
So the key takeaways here: if you've got a pup, a small dog, a young dog, socialization with dogs that you trust. That's obviously that you're putting things in there. And of course, training. And dogs continue, we need reinforcing training throughout a dog's life, that just because they can come to heel or, will recall, as you say. Sorry, all the ums here. It's just too many languages in my head. Train the recall, yes, when they're young, but also do refresher courses when you're out walking, when you're playing in the garden, just to, even in the kitchen, things to just reconfirm for the dog.
Yeah, I mean, I don't find training boring. And I know that's because it's my job, but you think it's my job, so I could be doing it all the time. But I like that little problem solving element, and I love doing that with my own dogs. I'll sort of think, they've just started to do right, I'm gonna just have a little play, and I always make it fun. It's either fun for me or fun for them, or it's always fun for them. Sometimes it's not quite as much fun for me because I kind of know that I've got to do it. But I fit it around. Yeah, I mean, you just feel silly, don't you? I know, I'm always acting like a lunatic, but I don't really mind, because I just think, right, I'm getting what I need from my dog, and that's, and my dog's enjoying it. So what could be better? I mean, the other day we were in her garden trying to teach her dog not to chase, and we were both skipping about like lunatics, and it worked so well. And then gradually we got the dog doing it on not just a jumping about crazy, but just a command. The dog was doing it on a command. So we started off being a bit mad and silly, and then we refined it. So she's not going to have to do that when she goes out.
Talking about singing and being lots of excited, I hear a little bark or something in the background there, Karen.
Oh, can you hear my extra bark? Yes, that's our new little dog. I might just go and check she's okay. I won't be a sec.
So tell me about the new addition to your home.
We've got a new little dog. She's called Maisie. And she's a Yorkshire Terrier, we think. Everyone keeps telling me she looks like a Cairn Terrier. And she's had all her fur cut short because she had quite matted fur when she went to the rescue. So they just gave her a trim. So she has these huge ears now. But she's quite a small... if she is a Cairn, she's very, very small. But I don't really mind what breed or not. I don't mind. She is quite terrier-y. She's quite a pushy little madam. And she didn't know how to sit, and she doesn't, she used to snatch treats and things like that. We've only really had her about a week, but she's fitting in quite nicely. So it's just, and I know, so everyone who's listening and going, oh, it's so easy for you, you're a trainer. No, it isn't. And let me tell you, you get a new dog and you think, oh, here we go again. Right, what do I need to do? And, but then, something that it's really taught me having all these dogs is that it doesn't all have to be done in a week. As long as she's safe and as long as she's happy, she can settle in, she can just be a dog. She's getting used to things around the home, and I'm doing little bits with her here and there. So I'm fitting it around everything else. But yeah, it is a worry. And I've had a couple of late night worries about, is it going to work out? Is she going to be all right? So, you're not alone out there, folks. Not at all.
It's all, I mean, bringing another dog into the household is, it's fun. Karen.
Well, when it's yours, it's tricky because you know that it's yours. I mean, we look after dogs for people while they go on holiday. So my other dogs are absolutely fine with that. They don't mind. They meet hundreds of dogs and they really don't care. When you know it's going to be your dog, the hope and the fears and the worries and the stress is yours. It's nobody else's.
Oh, yes. Oh, yes. Oh, yes. I know all about that. So, Karen, I think it's time that we moved on to the interview. Would you like to introduce that?
Yes, when I was at Crufts, now we did lots of interviews at Crufts, so we're not gonna keep those away. We're gonna release them one by one as we go along because they're so much fun. I spoke to Rosemary Conley, who everybody knows as a fantastic fitness and health and exercise guru. She is a real standard bearer for good health, good fitness, and she has been for many, many years. Now, I was absolutely thrilled to meet her because I've always wanted to meet Rosemary, and I think she's a great inspiration for lots of different reasons. But she was promoting the Kennel Club's Get Fit with Fido campaign, and Rosemary had just come from Dancing on Ice, which was the television program where they had to do various routines, and quite terrifying routines, some of them. And in fact, while we were interviewing her, she was telling us about a certain lift that she had to do. And, this is somebody who, she's not a young lady. I mean, she tells us, I think, in the interview how old she is. She just bent her foot right up to her leg and said, oh, we had to do this lift like this. And she just bent her leg. She's so flexible. And both Natalie and I, who was there with me, Nats, just open-mouthed at how incredibly fit she is. And do you know something, John? She attributes her fitness to walking her dogs. That's what she said. Yeah. She says it on the interview. I thought it was amazing. So here's me talking to Rosemary at Crufts. And hopefully, if you want to join in with Get Fit with Fido, you can join that. It's through the Kennel Club. And it is a brilliant idea. So many of us have dogs because we want to be out and about. And this is a really good focus for that energy. I'm very pleased to be talking to Rosemary Conley, who's come to Crufts today. Hello, Rosemary.
Hello, it's really nice to be here again.
So you're here at Crufts to promote Fit for Fido. Is that something that obviously is part of your fitness plan, is something that you need to promote to other people? Because I'm assuming that a lot of people with dogs are getting them for exercise.
I am a huge fan of Get Fit with Fido, and the principle of it is that you walk your dog more and you walk yourself more. And on that basis, both the dog and you are going to be fitter and healthier. What a dog does is give you a reason for going out for that walk that you so desperately need for yourself. And I love that, and I love the fact that the joy of a dog, taking a dog out for a walk and letting the dog have the sniffs and leave their pee mails and what have you is just fabulous. To be able to come back and you're happy, they're happy, you have a happy dog who now sleeps on the floor and just sort of leaves you alone and is just contented. It's a win-win situation. And the Kennel Club have put together Get Fit with Fido as an initiative, and people can enlist and sort of win prizes and so on. All they need to do is to go to the Kennel Club website, which is www.kennelclub.org.uk/Get Fit with Fido, and you'll find all the information there.
So you've got 3 dogs of your own. Tell us a bit about your dogs.
Well, Weiser, which is a very strange name, it means orphan, it's German for orphan, was found in the road, abandoned near a canal. I think she'd run off as about a nine-month-old Whippet Lurcher Cross. And I called her, and she'd been in the road for about 2 hours apparently, and she just got in my car and we obviously tried to find her owner but couldn't. And she's been with us for five and a bit years now. And she's a bit like, she's a Kate Moss really. She's incredibly beautiful, very elegant. And she's definitely the boss and has no rules. She sleeps on a bed and, she will go anywhere. Then we have 2 black Labradors, BB and Sky, and they're my husband's gun dogs, and they are quite young. They're not 2 yet, but they are hilarious. And Weiser loves them, particularly BB. BB and Weiser really get on like a house on fire.
So do you actually train the dogs yourself, or are they just very much pet dogs or pet dog training, or are they actual gun dogs? Do they go out and work?
They do go out and work. Sky is not as good a gun dog, but BB is a natural, a total natural. My husband is training them, and they have sort of some external training, but they're not sent away for training. And mostly they're at home because they are mostly pets, obviously. But they are funny. They do make us laugh.
I love reading on Twitter when you say you've been out for walks and you've had the various escapades of your dogs. And, presumably you see them as part of the family.
Our animals are very much part of our family, and I've always had dogs all of my life. And yes, it is one of those irritating things. You take them out for a walk and they insist on rolling in fox poo, and then you have to go home and then you have to bath them. It's a joy, but that's all part of the love of owning a dog, isn't it?
It is, certainly. What would you say was the best thing about your dogs apart from the fox poo and the enjoyment? No, seriously, what is the biggest benefit to you, do you think?
I think the biggest benefit of having the dogs for me is that it makes me get up at 6:30 in the morning and go for at least a mile walk. And do you know, that has given me the most amazing strength in my legs, just that 1 mile a day, for me to then go and do dancing on ice and cope completely with all of the training without any issues at all. I don't think I could have done it if I hadn't had that sort of 18 months of walking those dogs every morning.
And it's like, as you say, little and often. There doesn't have to be a great big session. It's more to do with keeping them happy, keeping yourself fit. And it's not that much effort and it's enjoyable. What's your sort of favourite walk? Where do you really love to go?
We live in a beautiful part of Leicestershire, and we have a lovely big garden, fortunately, so we can just walk around our garden quite happily. And we also have a very nice bridle path nearby, and that's the big treat walk, because that's probably about 3 miles that we would go there. So that tends to be a Sunday afternoon type of thing, which of course I haven't had any of those because I've been doing dancing on ice for the last so many weeks. So, but we're looking forward to the spring and being able to go out into the countryside. And already we're seeing some blossom coming out. We're going to see the leaves coming out. How lovely to be able to take your dog out, enjoy this beautiful countryside that we have in the UK, and let's make the most of it and make our dogs happy too.
I can imagine you're not a fair weather walker then. Do you get all togged up ready for those rainy, cold, wet days?
Because I do it first thing in the morning, you wouldn't recognise me. I have literally stepped out of bed, put my dog walking clothes on, put a woolly hat on, and gone out walking, and that's really part of the joy of it as well. Why not do that? But the dogs give you that discipline. We all need that discipline to be healthy. And people sort of marvelled at the fact of, at my age at 65, which of course is now very much on public record, I can do what I do, and I did dancing on ice and coped completely with all the physicality of it. And that's all down to the fact that simply, yes, I've been teaching exercise in my classes for 40 years, but not as much as people imagine. But I tell you what, it was the walking that made the difference.
So something that's very, very easy. And coming back to the Kennel Club scheme, this is something that everyone can sign up to and enjoy, and presumably will motivate them.
Everybody needs motivation to get fit, and signing up for Get Fit with Fido will provide all of that. It's free, you can enter, you can win prizes. Everybody wins. Why not do it?
Thank you, Rosemary. We're going to put the link to that on the site as well so that you can go straight through. And please sign up, and I'd love to hear how you get on. I'm sure Rosemary would too.
Absolutely.
Well, thank you very much, Karen. I'm sure you enjoyed talking to Rosemary.
Oh, I did. I was thrilled. She's one of my heroines. She really is. That's really gushy, isn't it? But I do think she's great. And she's a great businesswoman as well. Look at what she's managed to achieve. She is incredible. And she's been doing it for years. She's still going strong. And you know, she's just one of those people that I think, yeah, she sets a really good example. But I think she's great with her dogs as well, and she's never hidden that. So she is on Twitter, and she's often talking about her dogs on there. So if anyone's on Twitter and they want to get hold of her, then search under her name.
All right then, Karen, let's wrap things up. We've put lots of bits together there. Sorry if it's been a couple of weeks until the last show's come out. We've just seem to be super busy at the moment, but well,
I've got new books that I'm writing. I've got so many things on, lots of projects on. I'm at London Pet Show at the weekend. I know this won't come out before then, but if I did see you there, hello again.
And do come and say hello on Twitter. Remember, you can get a hold of Karen at Wildpaw on Twitter, and you can find me at John Buskell, JONBUSCALL. Remember to go along to Karen's website if you'd like to put together your tailor-made training manual, and that's available at intellidogs.com, where you'll also find the podcast and lots of good little blog posts that Karen puts together. Have we got anything exciting coming up in the future, Karen?
We've got, for the next podcast, we have a couple more interviews. We've got an interesting product talking about dogs that are a worry or not a worry that you can put on your lead or the dog's collar, which I'm going to show the interview on that. We've also got a brilliant interview with Alan Parton from Hounds for Heroes. And what an inspiration, talking about inspiring people in the dog world. I've never met so many fantastic people, and I count Alan as one of those. So I hope everyone will come and download the podcast for that.
All right then, Karen. Let's say goodbye then.
Right, well, goodbye. I hope you all have a really, really good break and a good week between now and the next podcast.
All right, bye-bye.